Okay, hello everybody. This is Soraya. Welcome back to the Purposeful Professional. And today I'm excited to be interviewing another Purposeful Professional. This woman is like a maestro of LinkedIn. She is like a super networker, super entrepreneur, and I really do admire her. So I'm really, really excited to have Preeti Adhikary on the podcast. Preeti, introduce yourself to the people on the Purposeful Professional.
Perfect. Thank you, Soraya. I'm so excited to be here. I am Preeti Adhikary. I've been a lot of different things in my professional life, but currently everybody knows me as the founder of the Great Nepali Diaspora.
Did you finish it or did it buffer for
Yes,
you?
yes. Actually, yeah. Did you want me to say a little bit more?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you for that. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I think like you're such an inspirational person, so I'm really really excited to have you on the podcast, especially. So one thing we like to do with all of our guests is we like to tap into their expertise for a section that we call pop purpose. So we like to talk about different like popular culture topics or different social topics that people are interested in. And I figured since you are like a LinkedIn master, one of the things that people would want to learn most from you, and one of the things that I want to learn most from you, is how to really master LinkedIn. I think a lot of us, we're struggling. I'm sure you see people who do the too personal posts. They kind of post
Right,
on LinkedIn how people would post on Facebook and MySpace.
right,
And I'm
mhm,
also sure you see people with the overly professional
mhm.
image that can't connect with anyone. I
Right,
kind of
right.
see like both groups of people. And I think we struggle to find a happy medium when it comes to social media, especially LinkedIn. It's like, should it be personal? Should it be professional? How much should I share? How much should I not share?
Right.
And I think I love your post because I feel like I've been able to almost like live vicariously through the development of the great Nepali diaspora through watching you. And I think that shows that you're an excellent marketer, but also that you've built an excellent personal brand that is authentic, but still helps you to achieve your goals. And I have a couple
Right.
questions on
Sure.
different dilemmas that people might face on LinkedIn, and we need your help. So these dilemmas were sourced by people in my own network when I thought of this episode. So the first one is someone might say, I struggle to stand out in my industry. What can I do?
Um, I think, everything related to LinkedIn or any social media, sometimes, I think we overthink,
Mm,
right? Because even we tend to compare ourselves with somebody that's, already, a thought leader, or, we're like, oh my God, I don't have what they have, right? So just as an example, earlier I used to think when I started, I was like, especially in the AI industry, I was like, okay, I don't have a PhD, I'm not technical. So I would sort of, have all this imposter syndrome and all of it, right? So my advice to everybody is don't overthink it, right? Like we said, if you look at your news feed right now, there's tons of people posting everything, but not everybody is relevant, even if they're in the industry, right? And especially now with Chat GPT, anybody can put out content. It's not the hardest thing, right? But that's not interesting, right? You
mm.
could be such a big leader, such a well-known figure, and your post can just be just okay, right? So don't overthink it. I think you just and get started.
Yeah, I feel like I knew you were gonna say that. When I was writing those questions, I was like, I feel like Preeti's gonna say, don't overthink. Because I think like for people who have authentic, really, really
Yeah.
authentic and powerful brands like yours, you can't overthink it, right? And a part of it has to be spontaneous and natural and feel natural to people?
But it comes after a while, right? So I don't want to sort of lie to people and say, oh my God, day one you're going to sound authentic, that day one you'll find your niche, right? It doesn't work that way, right? I think everything in life is all about practice, and you just put yourself out there. I joke with people that I use LinkedIn as my personal journal.
Mm,
Sometimes it's personal, some it's not, and it's not, at this point it's not calculated at all, right? Sometimes I would just type things on my phone and post, right? And occasionally I find, even myself, I find some of my posts are a little cringy or a little facebooky or whatever, right? But I'm okay with I'm okay with what I'm putting out there, right? So even for people, that's what it is like. Once you put yourself out there, you sort of figure out your voice, your sort of space, right? And you also, over time, you also attract like-minded people, right?
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Powerful. I love that. Those are some great, great, great tips. And thank you for being so transparent and like,
No
it is
worries.
a process. All right. So the next dilemma I often hear a lot of the time is I'm seen as overly professional and not authentic enough. I struggle to connect authentically when sharing my personal career journey. What can I do?
I think, not every post or not every person needs to, like, it doesn't need to be like a such a disruptive breakthrough ideas, right? I think again, overthinking is that, right? We're thinking, oh my god, my story or what I'm sharing needs to be like, oh my god, nobody's ever posted that, nobody's ever heard of that. It doesn't, right? A lot
Mhm.
of times it's, there, all these ideas are already floating in the world, people have experienced it. But I think what makes a difference and what makes you relatable is your sort of version of it, right? Your sort of, how you sort of put a spin on it. So, the way to sound authentic is not to try to come up with something that's, so crazy, but, something very ordinary. Ordinary and simple things are, I think, the best things in life.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that you talked about like relatability and how important that is. And you're right. For people who feel like they're overly professional, or we might get that feedback that they're overly professional,
Right.
and I was one of those people, I feel like legitimately, we only hear from them when, like you're starting a new business or when you're doing something big. And
Right.
I think that you're right. Like it's the lack of sharing of the little things or even the transparent like aspects of like, hey, this is uncomfortable, that can make people not seem authentic. So I love what that you said. Like it's really
Exactly.
about making sure that everything doesn't have to be this big breakthrough or a new launch or a success, and maybe pulling
Right.
back a little bit of the veil to kind of show the process of getting there. I think
Exactly.
that's where it is.
Exactly.
All right. Cool. So for the last one, the last scenario that
Sure.
I hear a lot, and this is common amongst young professionals. I come across as open and approachable, but others don't take me seriously as a professional. And we'll just say like, you see those people, a lot of emojis. It's like, oh, they're fun, but I don't want to hire them. Like some people come across like that on LinkedIn. I think
Mm,
there's some people
mm.
who fall into that. It's rare, but it happens. What can they do? What can they do? They're seen as approachable, fun, but they're not taken seriously as a
Right.
professional or as a budding thought leader or even budding
Mm.
entrepreneur, whatever field they're in. What can they do?
I mean, on a personal level, I think emojis are fun, right? But I mean, I am not going to say, there's people have all these criteria for everything, right? Oh, use five, limit your use of emojis, have five hashtags, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, these are just, short-term things. I think, everybody should think of a personal brand or a brand for what they're building as a long-term game, right?
Mm,
So if it's a long-term game, you are sort of going to, be consistent, show up, and like move ahead, right? And I think one thing, for whether it's somebody starting out or somebody that is on the younger side, right? I think it's all these biases that we've traditionally had in terms of ageism and all of it, right? That you have to sound a certain way, you have to act a certain way. I remember being told that you're supposed to emulate what your leaders in your company look like, in terms of how they dress and how they behave and how they talk and all of it.
mhm,
And right now, I think things are changing, which is incredible, right? You're supposed to own your unique identity and all of that, right? So if you think that your fun personality actually prevents you from getting the job, it's probably not the right fit,
mm,
right? Because if you think about even your career, whatever you do in life, whether it's entrepreneurship or not, if you think about that, there you will find people that will love you for your fun personality, and you can add value to the organization, right? So if you sort of if it was 10, 15 years ago, yes, I do agree, right? I think there was a lot of biases, and it probably was a hindrance. But at this time, I think the world has opened up so much that you can find people that will adore your personality, and you should, go for that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that answer. And that shows me how forward thinking you are, because so many of us are still on the we're going to get into this a little bit, but coming from an Ivy
Right.
League background especially, we're still under the this is the right way to present yourself. This
Of
is the
course.
right way
Of
to
course.
show up. This is the right way to be a professional. And I think podcasts like this and spaces like this are trying to break that and
Of
tell
course.
people like, hey, you can be who you are and be accepted for who you are. But I love the fact that you said it might not be a good fit if they feel like your personality is a liability,
Exactly.
because so many of us are told to assimilate and to essentially change who we are to make our organizations, our employer, our industry comfortable. And I think
Right.
we're talking about influence today and like having influence. I think a part of being an industry definer is being able to be different, right? Do you want to be
Right.
someone
Right.
who aligns with the status quo, or do you want to be someone who defines the industry through showing people that there's a new way? And I think it's powerful for you to recognize, hey, like any space that doesn't accept or value me for who I am is
Right.
not the right space. And when it comes to industry, you might be an unconventional leader in your industry. Make
Right.
that industry shift and change. You have the power
Of
to
course.
bring that diversity. So I love that. I think that's great. Oh, okay. Thank you. That was a great opening segment. Thank you for your wisdom. I think we've all learned a lot. I know I can envision people like writing things down. And also following you on LinkedIn to see your amazing, amazing posts as
Thank
well.
you.
Okay. So I want you to let's talk about who you are as a person. And I think like central to your identity is just you being from Nepal and like having that experience. So I want to talk about a little bit about that. We call ourselves the podcast for the people, your career and the culture. So we talk a little bit about who you are as a person. We talk about your career as well as the cultural context that you operate in. So my first question for you is I'd love for you to define or name your current career path for the people on the podcast.
If you look at my current path, it will sound, I mean, it will look like a mixed bag because I've worked in so many different industries: banking, nonprofits, tech startups, and now entrepreneurial, sort of, community building, and so on. It will also look like a lot of random dots, very non-linear, because, different industries also worked in a lot of apart from the Nepal and the US. I've also lived and worked in Singapore and Canada, so very different worlds. So,
Mm-hmm.
it does look very non-linear, and I think that's something that we've all shied away from, right? I think what you're sort of taught and what we've all tried to do in life is sort of, find, have your long-term goal, your 10 plus year goal, and sort of move towards that, take the steps, right? But it's okay to not know as well, to try to explore what you are. And I think there's a few lucky ones that sort of know what they already want and they go after it, which is great. There's a few of us that sort of, figure things out along the way. And I'm here to tell everybody that it's fine. I think it's, at any age, if you give yourself time to figure out what your purpose is, it's okay.
Yeah, no, I love that because first and foremost, that is a question that, because I ask that question all the time, that is a question that stumps a lot of us, especially those who have chosen an entrepreneurial path after
Of
so
course.
many different things. It's like, what path am I on? But I love how you talked about it's nonlinear. But I always say, even with nonlinear paths, we can connect the dots and see that all the
Exactly.
dots kind of pointed towards one direction.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
it's kind
Exactly.
of like, in mathematics where they teach you how to draw the line of best fit.
Mhm.
That's kind of me nerding out, but
Exactly.
they teach you how to draw the line in between the points. And I think that that's something that a lot of us do when we look back in hindsight. And yeah, I think we can relate. A lot of us can relate to not feeling like you fit in any industry or wanting to see different industries because of curiosity.
Mhm.
I think that's wonderful. So you talked a lot about like your global outlook, having lived in Nepal, the United States, and Canada. I want to take you back to growing up in Nepal and what that was like for you. So, my question for you on that is how did you navigate growing up in Nepal as an ambitious and driven woman with maybe not necessarily entrepreneurial ambitions at the time, but entrepreneurial
Right.
inclinations? Like, how was that?
It's it's funny you ask that, because if people from my family and people I grew up with, I was a nerd, I was an introvert, I wouldn't really be, and it's funny that I'm building this community, and I'm people see me like out there all the time, right? So grew up in a middle class family in Nepal, family with I have two sisters. I think incredible childhood. At that time, in especially in Nepal, I think people preferred sons. It was a very different time, but my parents always really supported us, and they never treated us differently. I think that that confidence has been the cornerstone of so many things, I think, right? I've always I don't think I would define myself as entrepreneurial in a
Mm,
way, but I always knew I worked hard. I That's something that I really pride on myself on, that I can outwork anybody, right? And that's something that has been really interesting. But one thing I definitely want to add is I came to the US for my undergrad, right?
mm,
And actually, the first semester in college was the first time where I felt like, if I put in hard work, I would get the results. Like I used to do well in school, in high school, and so on as well. But this was the first time I felt like nothing else would matter, right? It's almost like, for computers, that's what you say, right? Input and output. Like if you
mhm.
input hard work, you do get good results, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that you're able to look back on your childhood and be like, that's a recurring theme on this podcast too, that, being a nerd, being an introvert. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to notice a couple of things about
Right.
people who are highly successful in life as adults. It wasn't always apparent, I think, as a child that I don't
Right.
want to say like you'd be the one, but like you'd be who you are today. And it just shows you
Right.
the power of number one, like our personalities can shift and change over
Of
time.
course. Of course.
And I think people should always be open to that evolution that can happen. But also,
Exactly.
I think one thing that I'm noticing a lot is in the seeds of introversion and even being a nerd, there are positive traits
Mm,
that I think a lot of people don't always tap into. Like you're talking
right.
about being able to work and outwork people. That's that like nerdy obsession that a lot of people grew up with. Just being
Right.
obsessed, like whether you were like a band nerd, a
Right.
theater nerd, a student
Right.
government, like whatever type of nerd you were,
Mm,
you were obsessed with something
of
and it
course.
consumed you. And I
Right.
think that that is the foundation for entrepreneurship. I'm also looking at research that is saying that ambiverts, so those who have a mixture of
Mm,
introversion and extroversion, are better leaders. And I think a huge part of that is because when you have that introverted side, that is your depth, that is your nuance, that is your,
exactly.
you can look inside to find meaning. And I think that that's so powerful. And honestly, I'm starting to realize many of the talented and even industry defining entrepreneurs of our age are introverted. And I
Right.
think it has a lot to do with the fact that their vision and the meaning that they find and make out of life is so internal that even when they deal with external limitations, you
Right.
talk about in Nepal, women not necessarily being the
Mm,
ideal children, even
right.
dealing in an environment that might not
Of course.
validate you, you know how to look within. And I
Exactly.
think that that's so powerful. I love that you talked about that because those are things that I'm
Thank
hearing
you. Thank
your
you.
story.
And just to add, I think one thing with introverts in general is they're so, good at observing other people, listening, right?
Yeah.
And I think over time it sort of becomes such a strength, right? I think, and I think even in terms of, just like you said, right, I think we're redefining leadership, because traditionally leaders are supposed to be, one, men, but two, also really these aggressive people, loud people, the people that have the loudest voice in the room and know how to dominate it, right? But now I think leadership is shifting, because the loudest person is probably full of BS, right?
Yeah. Ooh.
Sometimes, and not always, but sometimes, right? They're just, they have that, that confidence in all of it, but there are other people in the room that are probably silent but have so much value to offer, right? So being that introvert, growing up and everything, what it's also taught me is, one, the way I lead the organization, I do things, but also that I'm so conscious of people in meetings or in settings that you have to nudge to speak. but they're amazing, right? So for me, I think being able to also really relate to these people, right, and then get them in the fold is great.
Yeah, I feel like I was like, okay, now I'm starting to understand more of your story because I remember the first time that we had a conversation over Zoom, and I was like, wow, you're exceptionally well at just tuning in and tapping in. And I remember the person who told me about you was like, she's amazing. And I was like, okay, now I see why you're amazing. Cause I left that conversation feeling, wow, like this woman is really, she's doing it. Like she's ambitious, she's amazing. And I never really usually have that, but I could almost tell like you're really good at reading people and also responding to people. And I think those are some of the gifts of introversion, especially when you finally step out. You talked about finally putting yourself out there and like everything
Right,
you're doing, like you know what it's like to feel like the person in the room that whose voice wasn't heard. And I think you
right,
can
right,
bring out and pull out the talents of other people. I also see how you lead through LinkedIn. I see a little bit of your leadership style. You've empowered people to lead hubs. You it
yeah.
seems like you have a very decentralized style. Am I right? Like you empower
Yes,
leaders in
yes.
the
I mean,
organization.
and that's so important, right? I mean, I am building it in public, this community, and it's,
Mhm.
all global professionals, and it's important for me to show up because I want to really showcase that it's not easy, but, and I think that's what's resonated with a lot of people. But even in terms of my volunteers or people in the leadership roles, I want them to, have their brand of leadership, right? I think it's so
Yeah.
important to really showcase who people are, and they're all incredible. So
Yeah. Thank you. I wanted to point that out because I think sometimes leaders who are very, very not servant leaders, but leaders who, it's all about me. I'm the loudest person in the
right,
room. They oftentimes don't build leaders under them.
exactly,
From what I've seen with your work, you're building leaders under you, uniting them for the literally the Nepali diaspora. So
right.
that's powerful, and your ability to build coalitions. I think that goes right down to that childhood introversion and
Thank
build
you.
tune in. All right. So speaking of past, we're going to talk about the leap into
Okay.
entrepreneurship. So I want to know, like, when you thought of yourself as a child and you closed your eyes, what was the career path that you originally thought you were going to pursue, and why?
I thought would be an army doctor, actually,
Mm,
because I wanted to save lives, make an impact and all of that. Um, yeah, so different, but pursued that till high school, and one, I didn't enjoy it, and then a lot of things changed in life, and otherwise I would never have even come to the US if I was pursuing that, and my life, the trajectory of my life would have been so different. But that's what I thought, for a long time. And there was one show, this was this old, I don't know if you or the people in the audience can even relate to, that was like in an American show, like from some war, and it was full of army doctors. I remember watching that. It was like an old show even for our time, but I'm sure that had some impact as well on how I thought.
yeah, yeah. I hear that a lot. Like I'll hear like I want to help people, and it's
Mhm.
funny because you're in the nonprofit space.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of nonprofit leaders, such as myself, we always got the you should be a doctor growing up,
Mm.
or like because it's this thing of like it's this caring nature and this compassion
Right.
that drives us as children to want to be
Exactly.
doctors. But as we get older, we realize there's many ways to care.
Of course.
There's many ways to live out my values through my work, and I might not be healing the
Mhm.
bodies, but I might be providing
Of
spaces,
course. Of course.
communities, affirmation, advocacy. Like there are many ways to care for souls and to care for
Exactly.
bodies. And I think like beyond becoming a doctor. So I definitely love that. So I want to know, like, I know you went to like the Yale School of Management. Um, like what made you decide to, so we're going from like this childhood wanting to be a doctor
Right.
to
Right.
eventually getting to where you are today.
Right.
And I know that Yale and going to Yale was a part of that process. So like what made you decide to take the leap and venture into social entrepreneurship after attending a school like Yale?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with schools like Yale, I mean, I think Yale was one of the best decisions of my life. I think funny enough, I didn't when I mean, of course, lots of hard work to get in there. But I never felt like once I was there, I never felt like I didn't belong, right?
Mm.
Even though I am sort of different, and even the career paths, right? There is, traditional paths of, Ivy Leagues and, MBA and things like that, where a lot of people go into investment banking and consulting and all of that. So that was there. I think, for me, one, I did sense that, I am different in terms of what I'm sort of looking for, right? That the reason I actually went back to school after working for so many years is I was, I think, looking for something. I didn't know what it was. I needed this time to really reflect on my career and feel like, okay, where do I want to go, right? And in my mind, even when I went to Yale, I always thought, oh, it would be a corporate job. I would join a bigger startup, be their CMO, all of it. That's what I had thought initially going in. It was during COVID, so everything changed, right? I think for all of us, I think it has impacted so much for everybody. For me, I think the fact that my mom got sick in Nepal, and it changed. It was a wake up call for me. So I that sort of pushed me into an impact sort of space, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to see what this is. I don't think I had a, never had a plan of entrepreneurship and so on. So
Yeah. I I had to ask that because I feel like when you do walk in certain schools and in
yeah,
certain spaces, you feel like you have to be what they tell you to be.
right,
And it's not like they're telling you to be, but the environment, the
of course,
market, you see the
yeah,
starting salaries and you feel the pressure.
of course, of
And
course.
I think, I always start with the childhood question of like, what did you want to be as a child?
Mm,
I think, and I always say that those aspirations follow us.
of
And
course.
it's funny how you went to a school like Yale, which probably provided you with access
Mm,
to the top of the line
right,
employers,
right.
but you still had that internal compass of like, maybe I should try something
Mm,
different, or maybe
right,
I should try to maneuver in on a different way and an impactful.
right,
I would love to know though for you, why social entrepreneurship? Because a lot of people, especially with you, like the
right.
entrepreneurial instincts you have and the business experience you have, would not have chose the nonprofit
Mm,
route. And there's no stigma against nonprofits. I also
right.
run one, but some people don't see that as being
Yeah,
as
yeah.
prestigious. So I would love to know like why social entrepreneurship for you, especially like in the cultural realm that you're in.
Um, sure. So, I mean, I've been with a lot of tech startups, so, worked with a lot of tech startups and love that. One, I'm not technical. I don't code, right? So, I mean, at this point, you don't really need to code. But even when I thought about, starting my own company, I was like, okay, I would need a technical co-founder or, head of engineering or whatever, right? So that was always, even if I had some ideas, okay, maybe you can create a business. I sort of couldn't take that leap, but because it sort of was a limiting sort of factor, right? Um, in terms of a nonprofit, it's I am trying to figure out how to answer this because I run my organization like a startup. It's
Mm.
it's
Oh.
it's a it's a nonprofit. Just it's a
Mhm.
501(c)(3), but that's the because the impact sort of is the bottom line in a way, right? But in terms of how I run things, how I sort of lead, or how I sort of am growing, I never think of people in the nonprofit world probably will not relate in so many ways, right? Because I'm looking at speed, I'm looking at what I know, and I'm translating that. So even in
Mm.
terms of why I'm building it, it's all my lived experiences, and sort of the problems I've seen. Trying to sort of be a part of the solution, right? I can't admit, I can't claim to sort of solve all problems, but I'm trying to be part of the solution, and I'm trying to use my skills, whether it's marketing or anything else, to try to at least do something, right? So I'm still sort of, I think, struggling with that tag of social entrepreneurship,
Mm.
uh, because it's very different, right? But I think it's needed. So I'm 1 year in. I'm glad I actually did it.
I love that you said you're building a nonprofit like a startup, because that's necessary. And I think
Mm.
when you enter into certain industries who have certain, I guess, like status quo ideals, the nonprofit,
Mm.
because even before starting Identity, I've worked in nonprofit spaces as well. When you
Right.
work in those spaces, you understand that the rules are different, but you can
Of
come
course.
in and you can bring in your startup mindset
Right.
to the nonprofit space. Like you said, you're thinking about speed, productivity,
Right.
thinking about resource allocation in a different
Mm.
way, and even
Right.
scalability, which I think a lot of nonprofits
Exactly.
don't think about or even say that they can't scale. Nonprofits can scale. Absolutely. It's a
Exactly.
can-do mindset. And I think that the startup world probably prepared you to have that can-do mindset in the nonprofit world, where people often, I guess, like settle for status quo solutions or say,
Right.
well, I'm a nonprofit, so I can't do.
Exactly. Or I'm so, I think in
Yeah.
general, whether it's the nonprofit world or the world in general, I'm
Mhm.
so tired of people saying, "Oh, this is not how we do things. This is
Mm,
not how it's done." Right? You can
yeah.
do a lot of different things, right? And unless so that's what is different. And I think what I also learned is in the nonprofit world, sometimes it's uh, you know perfection is prioritized over speed, right?
Oh,
And
wow.
it has its merit, right? But for a lot of things that I'm doing, speed is also important. Like, sometimes, and I think that this whole cultural sort of thing of building in public or sort of showcasing what you're building is that, right? You're not sharing a full blown business plan and so on. We're all saying, oh, this is what I'm working on, it's evolving, and you're sort of doing bits and pieces of it, right? At this point, I don't think if I sort of spent 3 months building that business case sort of proposal and shared it, I don't think I would be anywhere, right? So it's a
Yeah.
choice, and I think there's pros and cons with everything, but I'm glad I'm building a nonprofit like a startup.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like startups often say like what move fast and break things, right? So you're talking a lot about speed being such an important factor. And when I see what you've
Right.
been able to do for your organization, I could honestly intuitively pick up that like that's the mindset that you have, that like it's progress over perfection. We're moving forward even if we
Course.
don't know everything. And I think that
Exactly.
that's entrepreneurial leader. That goes against what business school teaches though, which is like I need
Yeah.
you to know everything,
Right.
especially
You're supposed. Yeah.
yeah, I need you to know everything. I need you to run the
Right.
numbers and
Right.
the marketing. I need
Exactly.
this to all be aligned and on one page. And there's room for that, but you're also right. There's room for intuition, instinct.
Exactly. And
Um,
I'll connect this to the first question you asked, right? I
mhm,
mean, people trying to sort of find their space and be that thought leader and all of that, right? I think traditionally what we expected leaders to be is know everything. They're supposed to be the
mhm,
smartest people in the room, know all these answers, all of it, right? But the world has changed, right? We're okay with people not knowing, but we're sort of, actually it acts. I think it adds authenticity as well, because not everybody knows everything, right? So it's I would rather be a part of something where it feels like it's not manufactured, it's not scripted, it's not just for optics, but it's what it is, right?
yeah.
With all the flaws and messiness and all of it. And that's all of us, right? Our lives are, I mean, there's part of it that is manufactured, and probably there is a little bit of separation between our personal lives and our professional lives, or what we showcase, but it can't be scripted. And I'm tired of that as well. I'm tired of people just showing the super scripted optics related life.
That's so powerful. And one thing that you also talked about that I want to get into, and I want to
Sure.
connect what you've said to social
Mm.
entrepreneurship in general, and the field of social entrepreneurship.
Right.
So I went to a social entrepreneurial convening in Colorado last year, and
Right.
one of the things that we started saying is that social entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs. Why are we put in a box? And
Exactly.
a lot of the thing that you're talking about like optics, you
Mm.
even feel like you have to downplay, for example, your need for revenue because you're a nonprofit founder. What?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
thought you were a business.
Exactly. No, that's the thing, right? So it's crazy because
Hmm.
especially with things that we do, there is so much value you can provide, but just the label of a social entrepreneur versus a startup means that you people expect you to do the work for free, help
Mm,
them, and they will sort of benefit from it, which is great. But it's like that concept that you're supposed to be just working for impact. Why don't you sort of, but it's like the organization needs to sustain, right? So
yeah.
one of the things that I actually am doing is, so apart, instead of so we have few sort of buckets in terms of business and so on. So one of the things is corporate sponsorships, because they're not donations, right?
Mm,
Their revenue. So it means that the companies, the amazing companies that are supporting us, for them it's like, because they get tax benefits, but they see value in terms of our work, and they, the fact that we're amplifying their message and so on is a business benefit to them, not just a nice to do CSR thing, right? And
yeah.
for me, I count it as revenue, not a donation, because
Mm,
I'm like, actually I earned that. It's almost like a deal that a normal startup closes, right? So I think, even with that mindset, like we talked about, like running a startup, is that mindset that, yes, there is impact, and I think that sort of, in terms of our values and everything, that's important. But there needs to be revenue to be sustainable. There needs to be this, I think, even in terms of perception from the outside world, in terms of recognizing the work.
yeah. I agree
Mm.
wholeheartedly. And I also agree that the do-gooder image sometimes of a social entrepreneur holds us back and,
Oh.
and makes us not become unapologetic about the
Mm.
fact that, hey, I need to get paid, they need to get paid, we need to, if you have a building, keep lights on,
Yeah.
like, all of these things. And I love the fact that you've been able to transcend that and understand your journey is your journey,
Thank you.
and entrepreneurship is so individualistic that it's
Yeah.
like you can run your organization and you and your team build the values, and build the organization,
Exactly.
engineer
Right.
it as you see fit. And a part of that is dealing away with age old concepts that no longer serve us,
Right.
you know?
And I'll add something to this. I've actually never, I don't think I've actually shared this publicly, but,
Mhm,
growing up and so on, I've always been really, impact has always been something that I've been interested in,
mhm.
social work and all of that, right? But growing up, that perception of somebody that does social work was somebody that, sort of, might be from Nepal or anywhere else in the world, but does not, there was this, look or
Mhm,
behavior that we sort of have slotted, right? Social workers aren't supposed to, and this is going to sound like such a stereotypical thing to say, but they're not supposed to care about how they look, or like, care about, like, really so purpose driven that they sort of are like monks, you know what I mean, right?
yeah.
That they're
Mm,
like, even in terms of, um like a lifestyle sort of choice, right? So
mhm.
for me, I think, one of the things that I struggled growing up is, it felt like social entrepreneurship or social work was this, really isolated place where people that sort of were sort of giving up every sort of material things would do, right? It
Mm,
never felt like normal people that, maybe went to Ivy League or maybe did this would do it. You know what I mean, right? And I think it's such
mm.
a negative connotation, and you're right. It's, I think, all of us with our uniqueness, even with, uh, our different experience, we can still contribute and we can be social entrepreneurs, but we don't have to fit in that box, uh, by the way we look or the way we lead our lives or anything else, right?
Yeah, I like to challenge people and say that good entrepreneurship is social. Because think of it this way, like some of the like biggest companies of the 21st century have completely changed the way how we live,
Yes.
work, drive. And those are all social things. So good entrepreneurship is social. As long as you have a net positive, you're a social entrepreneur on the environment.
Exactly.
You are. And I
Right.
think that people shouldn't feel confined to that label. I understand what you're saying. Like even in the nonprofit world, don't be too glamorous, don't be too
Right.
sophisticated. And as I've grown in my career, I'm actually meeting with like a personal brand consultant. Like we're building out from my style to everything. And people would say, well, that's shallow. Don't do that. It's shallow because I began realizing when I got into these rooms, how I dress, how I show up affects how people see me, which affects how people see my organization. And if I don't bring my A game style wise, how can I
Right.
really reach where I want to go? And these
Right.
are like the practical things that I think about, but
Of
people would say,
course.
"Oh my God, that's so taboo. I need you to suffer for the mission. I need you to look, like humble." And I'm a humble person. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
there's this thing of like I need you to look the part of a
Right.
suffering
Right.
activist or
Mm.
advocate.
Right. And I think it's not about not being authentic, right? I think it's about what will it take to make you feel the most confident you can be, right? And I think for different people, it's different things, right? I think, for me, it might be red lipstick or whatever, right? Or something else, right? But it's just the whole package of you sort of, one, it's obviously hard for us to get into these rooms, but when we get to these opportunities, how do we position ourselves as the best version uh, on every metric, right? I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's so important. And I think more leaders have to become unapologetic about wanting
Exactly.
themselves and their
Right.
organization to be the best they can be. So I know it's 12:01. Do you have a meeting after this? Most likely, right?
I do. Let me quickly. How much time do we need?
Yeah, I think maybe just one
Five
last
minutes.
question about the great Nepali diaspora, maybe like 10 minutes.
Okay.
Um,
Let me quickly send them a quick message. Should be fine.
Okay, so my last and final question for you, because I know you're doing such powerful and groundbreaking work. I want to know, like, what inspired the great Nepali diaspora, and how were you able to rally the diaspora community for Nepal together in like such a powerful, powerful way?
Sure. So one of the things, and I think, it's not just Nepal or anything like that. Especially if, you're a minority of any sort of underrepresented anything, right? We can relate to this, whether it's women, whether it's, our race, ethnicity, whatever it is, right? I think there's a victim mentality, right? I mean, of course, there is inequity. I'm not sort of, I'm the
Mhm.
last person to sort of, sugarcoat things, right? There is obviously a lot of things. But, what we've forgotten is our own communities now, especially 2024, there is so much power within our communities, right? But we're not harnessing it. We're just, sometimes we're just looking outside for uh, to solve our problems or help each, right? We're not saying, okay, can we also, apart from everything else, can we as community really rally and really do that, right? We don't. What I also realized, number two, is it's true with the Nepalese diaspora, and I think there is a lot of common things with other sort of ethnicities and all of that as well. We're so connected on a social level, right? People hang out all the time. They're celebrating things together. They're hanging out, everything. But nobody really talks about professional things, right? They're not saying, oh, can you help me find a job? Can you help me, I'm becoming an entrepreneur. Can you help me with something? Can you help me with connections? Like none of these. Or or even like not just that, like even if somebody has like, okay, I have a really tough boss, how do I sort of navigate that? Or how do I balance work life, all of that, right? We never have these conversations even with our closest friends and so on, right? And I had experienced that throughout my career, my professional life. And it's a behavior shift, right? It's like, if we just start doing that, there's already that the connection, everything is already there, but it takes it to the next level, right? So the focus has been just that, right? So, how do we sort of translate these social connections that people have, communities already have, but we activate it on a professional sort of thing, right? So, how do we sort of encourage people to mentor each other? How do we encourage people to, refer for jobs, or, invest in companies, or whatever it is, right? So behavior shift. The starting point for us is networking events. I think a lot of people network, whether by choice or because they have to, they're looking for a job. But how do we sort of make it really intentional, and things like that? And that sort of is our foray into everything else that the community is.
Yeah, no, I love the fact that you started with and I totally understand what you mean when it's like getting rid of thinking about everything we can't control and thinking about what we do
Right,
have.
right.
So you're activating that social capital and turning it into economic capital. You're turning it into wealth generation. You're
Exactly.
turning it into, we're taking one form of wealth and we're
Yep.
shifting it into others. And I think that
Exactly.
that's powerful. And congrats to you for being able to be the visionary behind something that is so impactful in the way that we see wealth. Because wealth
So,
exists all around us. It's about how we
exactly.
feel that value to create that economic value and return. So
Exactly.
that's wonderful that you're connecting people. I mean, I see you connect people with jobs, opportunities. I know you all also have like a startup accelerator. I mean,
Right,
y'all are taking this like, we should just be a community, and bringing into, we should be a resource hub. And I think that
right.
that is powerful because it helps
Thank
everyone
you.
to realize I have something to contribute, whether mentorship,
Exactly.
whether funding, whether writing somebody their first check,
Right.
investing, like
And
I
it
can
can be such
play a
little
role.
things, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be these crazy big things. It's just the small things can really at scale. And then that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? You're talking about scale for nonprofits. If we scale it, it just leads to amazing, incredible things.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Preeti. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we can go for
I
hours
know.
just on the similar perspectives that we have and the things that we've seen. But I want to thank you for this conversation. I want to
No,
thank you for the work that you do and salute you in the community building, wealth generating, just generational shift that is going to happen, not just for Nepal, but for so many other communities that will be inspired by what you're doing. So continue to do what
thank
you're
you.
doing. And I thank you for being on the podcast. All
No,
right.
Surya, thank you so much. And I'm so proud of everything that you are.
All right. Thank you so much, Preeti. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right. We will talk. Take care. All
Bye.
right. Bye.